Greetings everyone, I'm History Dude and thank you for joining me on our journey through time. Today I'll be sharing with you a heartbreaking video about the atrocities against the Native Americans committed by the United States government. Number 1. The Trail of Tears. President Andrew Jackson enacted the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which forcibly relocated Native American tribes living east of the Mississippi River to Indian Territory, which is located in present-day Oklahoma. This act was put in place in order to make way for white settlements on their land, and it was called the Manifest Destiny. Early politicians thought it was the new nation's destiny to expand across North America, leading the natives on a devastating journey marked by disease, starvation, and death. The Creek, Seminole, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Cherokee lost an estimated 10,000 people. Number 2. Smallpox blankets and mass genocide. In 1763, the British retaliated against the natives. It's called the Fort Pitt Incident, and it's when Sir Geoffrey Amherst decided to wage biological warfare for an uprising. Captain William Trent, a militia captain, wrote in his journal, quote, "We gave them 2 blankets and a handkerchief out of the smallpox hospital. I hope it will have the desired effect." Amherst wrote in a letter, quote, "Could it not be contrived to send the smallpox among those disaffected tribes of Indians? We must on this occasion use every stratagem in our power to reduce them." After the United States was established, a series of massacres led by the government were called the Indian Wars. It authorized over 1,500 wars, attacks, and raids on the natives. By the end of the late 19th century, less than 238,000 indigenous people remained, a sharp decline from the estimated 5 million to 15 million living in North America when Columbus arrived in 1492. Number 3. Kidnapped Native children forced to conform through assimilation schools. There were more than 523 government-funded and often church-run Indian boarding schools across the U.S. in the 19th and 20th centuries. Indian children were forcibly abducted by government agents sent to schools hundreds of miles away and beaten, starved, or otherwise abused when they spoke their native languages. Beginning with the Indian Civilization Act Fund of March 3, 1819, and the Peace Policy of 1869, the U.S. government worked with several denominations of the Christian Church to implement Indian boarding schools. The school's policies were designed with the intent to implement cultural genocide through the removal and reprogramming of American Indian and Alaska Native children to accomplish the systematic destruction of Native cultures and communities. The stated purpose of this policy was to, quote, "kill the Indian, save the man." Number 4. The sterilization of Native women. In the 1970s, fear of overpopulation and resource scarcity, as well as changing racial demographics, motivated the Nixon administration to promote family planning. Under this policy, federally funded sterilizations increased nearly 300% from 1970 to 1977. Because the Indian Health Service was often the only healthcare provider geographically and financially available to indigenous women on reservations, they were particularly vulnerable to paternalistic and racist abuse by IHS physicians and social workers. These practices culminated in a horrific pattern of exploitation in which Women of All Red Nations, or WARN, an indigenous women's activist organization, contends sterilization rates were as high as 80% on some reservations as compared to a national average of 15% for white women. By the close of the 1970s, Dr. Pinkerman Urey estimated that less than 100,000 indigenous women of childbearing age remained unsterilized. Unfortunately, the sterilization of women in the 20th century also included Hispanics, African Americans, and anyone deemed by the U.S. government labeled unfit to be a mother. 5. Modern troubles. The Native American population is still targeted by injustice today. Native students perform 2 to 3 grade levels below their white peers in reading and mathematics. They are 237% more likely to drop out of school and 207% more likely to be expelled than white students. One contributing factor to this achievement gap is that most American Indian, Alaska Native students are not prepared to learn when they walk through the doors of their school. Other factors include the effects of poor economic conditions in many Native communities and add to the challenges facing families in schools. Low-income homes, lack of adequate health care, and other factors create challenges that add to the achievement gap. American Indians and Alaska Natives have the lowest life expectancy at birth among all racial and ethnic groups in the United States. I hope you found this video eye-opening. If you have, hit those like and subscribe buttons down below and leave me a comment on your thoughts. I'm your local historian, and that's history, dude.